Two nations, 0 points between them. One match that will decide in all but mathematical certainty whether either team's first or fifth World Cup campaign continues beyond the group stage or ends in disappointment with an entire final fixture still to play. When Jordan and Algeria meet at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, the stakes could not be framed in starker terms. One team walks away with the 3 points and the renewed hope of qualification. The other team's World Cup, for all practical purposes, could already be over before their final group match against Austria even kicks off. This is the brutal, beautiful reality of group stage football at its most desperate and most compelling. Two sides desperate for the exact same outcome, knowing full well that only one of them can have it. Let's establish exactly how both nations arrived at this precipice, because the manner of each side's opening day defeat tells you almost everything you need to know about what to expect on Monday night. Algeria traveled to Kansas City to face the reigning World Cup champions, Argentina. In what every reasonable analyst flagged in advance as the single toughest assignment, the entire Group J schedule could possibly have handed them on match day 1. The result was as predictable as it was painful, a 3-0 defeat, with Lionel Messi delivering a hat trick that simultaneously decided the match and pushed the Argentine superstar to the brink of breaking the all-time World Cup scoring record. But the manner of that defeat matters considerably for what comes next. Algeria's veteran defender Asa Mandi became the first African player on record, dating back to 1966, to complete 100 or more passes in a single World Cup match, finishing with 100 completions from 105 attempted passes, a 95.2% completion rate that speaks to genuine defensive composure and technical quality even amid a heavy scoreline. Winger Faris Chaibi, meanwhile, was directly involved in 4 of Algeria's 7 total shot attempts on the night, recording the most shots for the Phoenix at this year's Africa Cup of Nations, and carrying that same attacking threat into this World Cup. Algeria's defeat to Argentina, in other words, reflects more harshly on the scoreline than it does on the underlying performance. A side that competed credibly for large stretches against the best team in the world, undone ultimately by the simple, unstoppable brilliance of the single greatest goal scorer the tournament has ever produced, and by an error-strewn display from young goalkeeper Luka Zidane, who was at fault for 2 of Argentina's 3 goals. Jordan's story from their own World Cup debut carries an even more poignant and more encouraging undertone, despite an identical 3-1 defeat, this one to Austria. This was Jordan's first ever appearance at a World Cup finals, achieved through an Asian Football Confederation playoff, the capstone of a historic period for Jordanian football that also included a run to the final of the 2024 Asian Cup. And on football's biggest stage, against a well-organized, well-drilled Austrian side that would go on to defeat the very same Argentina that demolished Algeria with relative comfort in their own next match, Jordan did not simply make up the numbers. Ali Olwan scored Jordan's first ever World Cup goal, canceling out Romano Schmid's opener to briefly level the match, and Jordan remained genuinely competitive deep into the contest, by some accounts holding firm until as late as the 75th or 76th minute, by others remaining in the contest right up until the 12th minute of second-half stoppage time, before a Yazan Al-Arab own goal and a stoppage-time Marko Arnautovic penalty finally settled the match at 3-1 in Austria's favor. Jordan's manager Jamal Salami built this squad around collective structure and defensive organization rather than individual brilliance, and that approach, while ultimately insufficient to prevent defeat, demonstrated exactly the kind of competitive resilience that suggests Monday's match against a more talent-comparable Algeria side will be considerably closer than the bare rankings gap between these two nations might suggest. The historical head-to-head record between Jordan and Algeria offers a fascinating, almost contradictory picture. Heading into what will be just the 4th meeting between these two nations, and remarkably, the first in over 2 decades, Algeria won the first encounter 6-0 in Damascus back in October 1974, a result that speaks to a different football era entirely. Jordan, in a moment of historical revenge 14 years later, defeated Algeria 2-1 in Amman in 1988. The two countries then met in a 2004 friendly in Annaba that ended 1-1, with Abdelmalik Cherad canceling out Mahmoud Shelbier's opener. That match, played more than 2 decades ago, remains the most recent competitive data point connecting these two football nations before Monday's vastly higher stakes World Cup encounter, meaning there is genuinely minimal recent tactical history for either manager to draw upon, and both sides will be navigating this match with comparatively limited direct knowledge of how their specific opponent is likely to set up and respond under the pressure of an elimination-level fixture. The statistical models and betting markets, despite that historical uncertainty, have converged with remarkable consistency on Algeria as the clear favorites heading into Monday's match. Though crucially, not favorites by a margin, nearly as overwhelming as the gap between Argentina and Algeria, or between Austria and Jordan, in the tournament's opening round. Opta's supercomputer, running its standard 25,000 pre-match simulations, gives Algeria a 60.1% win probability, with Jordan's chances of securing their first-ever World Cup victory rated at 17.7%, and a draw assessed at 22.2%. Betting markets across multiple sportsbooks tell an extremely similar story. Bet365 prices Algeria at minus 167 to win outright, with Jordan out at plus 475 on the money line, while other markets have Algeria priced as favorable as 11/20ths, equivalent to odds of 1.55, reflecting the broad consensus that Algeria's superior European-based talent, squad depth, and tournament pedigree should ultimately prove decisive across the full 90 minutes. That talent gap is, on paper, genuinely substantial. Algeria's attacking unit features Riyad Mahrez, the veteran winger whose decades of experience at the highest levels of European football provide a level of individual quality that Jordan's squad simply cannot match on a player-for-player basis. Amin Gouairi, whose movement and link-up play in behind Algeria's front line is central to breaking down exactly the kind of deep, organized defensive block that Jordan is expected to deploy. And Mohamed Amoura, identified by multiple previews as Algeria's most prolific forward in recent matches, and expected to lead the line after featuring only as a substitute against Argentina. Algeria's broader pre-tournament form underlines the scale of attacking firepower at Vladimir Petkovic's disposal. 3 wins in their final warm-up friendlies before the World Cup, including a 7-goal demolition of Guatemala, a 1-goal victory over the Netherlands, and a commanding 4-0 win against Bolivia, results that, taken together, paint the picture of a squad that arrived at this tournament with considerably higher expectations than a single difficult opening assignment against the world champions should be allowed to diminish. Jordan's pathway to causing an upset, while statistically the minority outcome across every model surveyed, rests on a specific and genuinely credible tactical foundation. Moussa Al-Tamari, Jordan's captain and a teammate of Ali Olwan's at French club Rennes, provides the squad's primary outlet for creating something from individual quality in wide attacking positions. Though multiple previews note he struggled to consistently get into the match during Jordan's opener against Austria, and a quiet, ineffective performance from him on Monday would significantly diminish Jordan's already limited attacking threat. Ali Olwan himself arrives in outstanding individual form by Jordanian standards. His strike against Austria was his 30th goal at international level, 6 clear of Al-Tamari's own tally of 24, making the pair the only 2 members of Jordan's entire World Cup squad to have reached double figures for international goals across their careers. If Olwan can find the net for a second consecutive match, he would not only continue an excellent individual run of form, but would give Jordan a genuine fighting chance of springing the kind of result that would represent one of this tournament's most uplifting underdog stories. The specific defensive vulnerabilities that Algeria will be looking to exploit, and that several detailed previews have flagged as Jordan's most concerning statistical pattern heading into Monday's match, center on a troubling recent run of form that predates the tournament itself. Jordan have not won a single match since December 15th of the previous year, losing 4 of their last 5 fixtures, with their only positive result in that entire stretch being a 2-2 draw against Costa Rica back in March. More alarmingly for Salami's defensive setup specifically, Jordan have conceded at least 2 goals in each of their last 5 matches, and have not kept a single clean sheet during this 6-match winless run, conceding in every single one of those fixtures and losing 4 of them outright. Algeria, by stark contrast, have lost just 2 of their last 19 matches overall, and have kept clean sheets in 4 of their last 5 fixtures heading into this World Cup. though it's worth noting that run of defensive solidity was interrupted, at least partially, by conceding 3 times against Argentina, a result that several analysts have been quick to contextualize as a reasonable outcome against history's most clinical attacking force currently active in the sport, rather than evidence of any deeper defensive frailty in Petkovic's broader system. There is also a specific injury and squad news subplot worth tracking closely as kickoff approaches. Abdallah Nassib, an important member of Jordan's 3-man central defensive setup, was forced off in the 81st minute of the Austria match due to injury and faces what multiple previews describe as a genuine late fitness test to determine his availability for Monday's match. Should Nassib be ruled out, Salami would be forced into a defensive reshuffle at precisely the moment his backline most needs continuity and organizational familiarity against an Algerian attacking unit built specifically to exploit exactly that kind of defensive uncertainty. Yazan al-Arab, whose unfortunate own goal against Austria directly gifted 3 points to Ralf Rangnick's side, will be carrying a particular weight of personal motivation into Monday's match, desperate to atone for that costly error with a more composed and more disciplined defensive performance against Algeria's considerable attacking talent. What makes this fixture genuinely fascinating from a tactical perspective, beyond the simple talent differential that the betting markets reflect, is the specific defensive approach Jordan is virtually certain to deploy, and whether Algeria possesses the patience and precision necessary to break it down effectively. Every preview surveyed converges on the same basic expectation. Jordan will set up in a deep, compact, organized defensive block, conceding territory and possession almost entirely to Algeria's technically superior squad, and looking to spring forward on direct, quick counter-attacking opportunities through Al-Tamari and Olwan whenever Algeria's defensive structure is stretched in pursuit of additional goals. This is precisely the kind of low-block defensive approach that has already produced one of this tournament's genuine shock results: Cape Verde's historic goalless draw against Spain. And the question hanging over Monday's match in San Francisco is whether Algeria possesses the patience, the individual quality in tight spaces, and the tactical sophistication necessary to break down a similarly structured defensive wall, or whether Jordan's organizational discipline under Salami can frustrate Algeria's attacking talent for long enough to manufacture the kind of result that would represent the single greatest moment in the brief history of Jordanian international football. The most likely script for Monday's match, based on the convergence of statistical models, betting markets, and tactical previews surveyed across multiple independent sources, points toward a competitive opening period in which Jordan's defensive discipline genuinely complicates Algeria's path to goal, before the underlying gap in individual quality and squad depth eventually tells across the full 90 minutes. Multiple previews land on a specific predicted scoreline of 2-1 in Algeria's favor, with the over 2.5 total goals market and the both teams to score market both identified as carrying genuine value, given Jordan's tendency to concede at least 2 goals per match, combined with their demonstrated ability to find the net themselves through Olwan's continued excellent individual form. One particularly detailed preview lands on the alternative, slightly more conservative prediction of a controlled 1-0, or 2-0 Algeria victory, suggesting under 2.5 total goals as the more statistically sound wager. Given Algeria's recent defensive solidity, outside of their lone difficult assignment against Argentina. Whatever the final scoreline, the broader stakes attached to Monday's result extend with brutal clarity into the calculus both nations face heading into their respective final group matches. Algeria close out their group campaign against Austria, the same Austrian side that pushed Argentina hard in their own opener, and that currently sits second in Group J's standings. Meaning a positive result here against Jordan would place qualification largely in Algeria's own hands heading into that decisive final fixture, while a defeat or even a draw would leave Petkovic's side needing a positive result against a genuinely dangerous Austrian team, simply to keep their World Cup alive. Jordan's situation is, if anything, even more stark. Their own final group match comes against Argentina and Lionel Messi, an assignment that every reasonable analyst expects to produce a comfortable Argentine victory regardless of where Messi's individual goal-scoring record stands by that point in the tournament. This means Monday's match against Algeria represents, in the most literal and immediate sense available to either nation, their single most realistic opportunity across the entire group stage to secure the 3 points necessary to keep their respective World Cup dreams alive beyond Matchday 3. One team will walk away from Levi's Stadium on Monday night with the points, the momentum, and the renewed belief that their tournament continues into a final, must-watch group match with something tangible still to play for. The other team's World Cup, whether it is Algeria's hopes of reaching the knockout stage for the first time since 2014, or Jordan's remarkable historic debut campaign on the sport's biggest stage, will, for all practical competitive purposes, have already ended, with one final, largely academic fixture against vastly superior opposition still left to play out. That is the brutal mathematics of group stage elimination football. And on Monday night in Santa Clara, under the lights of Levi's Stadium, two nations desperate for the exact same outcome will discover, in the span of 90 minutes, which one of them gets to keep dreaming, and which one of them has to start planning the long flight home. There is a broader, almost poetic symmetry to how both of these football nations arrived at this exact moment in their respective World Cup journeys, and it deserves a final word before kickoff. Algeria's relationship with the World Cup has been one of frustrating near misses and long absences, punctuated by occasional moments of real brilliance. The two-time African champions had not featured at a World Cup finals since their 2014 campaign, which ended in heartbreaking fashion with an extra-time defeat to Germany, the eventual tournament winners in the round of 16, a result that remains to this day the single furthest Algeria has ever progressed in World Cup history, achieved only once in 5 total appearances at the tournament. They missed qualification entirely for the 2018 tournament and fell agonizingly short at the final qualifying hurdle for Qatar 2022, making this 2026 return to the World Cup stage after a 12-year absence, an occasion that the Algerian Football Federation and an entire passionate fan base across North Africa and the Algerian diaspora in Europe have been anticipating with enormous expectation. A group stage exit here without even matching their 2014 achievement of reaching the knockout rounds would represent a genuinely disappointing outcome relative to the talent and depth currently available to Vladimir Petkovic, talent that many neutral observers consider the best Algerian squad assembled in over a decade. Jordan's story, by contrast, carries none of that weight of previous expectation or previous disappointment, precisely because there has never before been a previous World Cup campaign to measure this one against. Everything about Jordan's presence at this tournament is unprecedented, historic, and, by the admission of the players and coaching staff themselves, already something close to a triumph, regardless of what happens on the pitch across these 3 group matches. That context matters enormously for understanding the psychological dimension of Monday's match. Algeria carries the weight of a nation's renewed World Cup ambitions, and the specific pressure of needing to prove that this return to the tournament, after 12 years away, represents genuine progress rather than another disappointing early exit. Jordan, while certainly desperate for the historic achievement of a first-ever World Cup victory, plays with the freedom and the lack of pre-existing pressure that comes from writing an entirely new chapter of national footballing history with every single match, regardless of the final scoreline. That psychological asymmetry, pressure to deliver versus freedom to surprise, has, throughout football history, occasionally proven just as decisive as the underlying talent gap between two competing nations, and it represents the single most compelling reason why Monday's match in Santa Clara, despite the clear statistical and betting consensus favoring Algeria, genuinely deserves to be watched as a contest rather than dismissed as a formality. Kickoff at Levi's Stadium is scheduled for 11 o'clock Eastern Time on Monday night. Broadcast live across ITV and ITVX for audiences in the United Kingdom, and across Fox and Peacock in the United States. Slavko Vincic, an experienced European referee, takes charge of what promises to be an emotionally charged and tactically fascinating encounter between two football nations, separated by decades of contrasting World Cup history but united in this single moment by the exact same desperate need for a result that keeps their tournament dreams alive. By the final whistle, one team will have taken a decisive step toward the knockout stages they so urgently crave. The other will be left counting down the days until a largely academic final group match, reflecting on a World Cup debut or a long-awaited return that ended not with the bang either nation had hoped for, but with the quiet, grinding disappointment of a single match that simply did not go their way.